Everyone thinks the California gold rush was about men with shovels, about dirt-stained hands, about luck, sweat, and striking gold deep in the ground. But what if that story is incomplete? What if the real winner never touched a pickaxe at all? While thousands of men flooded into California chasing glitter in the soil, one black woman saw something they didn't. They looked down into the ground. She looked around at the people, and that single shift in vision changed everything. This was a time when opportunity was not supposed to belong to her, a time when race closed doors before you even reached them, a time when being a woman meant staying invisible. Yet in the middle of chaos, greed, and desperation, she quietly built real wealth, not someday, not eventually, but right there, in the heart of the gold rush. Most miners believed gold was the only path to success. They worked themselves to exhaustion. They gambled their lives on luck, and most of them failed. She did not follow them. Instead of competing in a brutal race she was never meant to win, she chose a different lane. She studied human behavior. She noticed patterns. She understood what people truly needed when dreams collide with reality, and that understanding made her richer than men who dug for years and found nothing. By 1855, while white miners were still chasing hope in the dirt, she had already built something far more powerful: steady income, control, security. This is not just a story about money, it is a story about strategy, about clarity in the middle of madness, about how the smartest people don't fight the crowd, they position themselves above it. History rarely tells stories like this, because this story challenges what we think we know about success. It challenges the idea that hard work alone wins. It challenges the belief that you must do what everyone else is doing to succeed. And that's exactly why this story matters. By the end of this video, you'll understand how real wealth was built during one of the most ruthless periods in American history. You'll see why following the crowd often leads to failure. And you'll discover a lesson so powerful that it still applies today, whether you're building a business, chasing a dream, or trying to break free from limitations placed on you. This is the story they didn't want remembered. The story of how quiet intelligence defeated loud ambition. The story of how one woman turned exclusion into advantage. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change the way you think about success forever. Before we talk about the woman who changed everything, we need to understand the world she stepped into. The California gold rush was not just a historical event, it was a mass obsession. In 1848, when gold was discovered, the news spread like wildfire. Word traveled faster than logic. People abandoned jobs, families, and entire lives because they believed a single discovery could make them rich overnight. Before we talk about strategy or intelligence, it's important to see why mining felt like the only option. Gold was visible. It could be held in your hand. Stories circulated of men becoming wealthy in days. These stories ignored the thousands who failed. But hope does not listen to statistics. It listens to desire. So people followed the image of gold as if it were destiny. Before we talk about opportunity, we must talk about chaos. California towns grew overnight without rules, order, or protection. Camps were crowded. Supplies were scarce. Prices were inflated. Food, water, tools, and shelter became luxuries. Everyone was in a rush, and no one trusted anyone. Survival itself became a daily challenge. Before we talk about wealth, we need to talk about violence. The gold rush attracted not just dreamers but thieves, gamblers, and predators. Disputes over land and claims often turned physical. Weapons were common. Law enforcement was weak or non-existent. Justice was decided by force, not fairness. For many, fear became part of daily life. Before we talk about competition, we must understand how brutal it really was. Thousands of men worked the same rivers and hills. Every promising location was quickly taken. Late arrivals were pushed aside. Stronger groups controlled better land. If you couldn't defend your claim, you lost it. Skill mattered less than power. Before we talk about success, we must recognize how exhausting mining was. Days were long. Bodies broke down. Illness spread quickly. Many miners lived in filthy conditions with little medical care. The work demanded everything, and most received nothing in return. Gold was rare, but failure was common. Before we talk about belief, we must acknowledge how deeply people were convinced. Mining wasn't just a job, it became identity. Men measured their worth by how long they stayed and how hard they dug. Leaving felt like admitting defeat. Even when they were losing, they kept going. Before we talk about reality, we must face the truth. The system was designed to reward very few. Most miners never found enough gold to change their lives, but by then they were trapped. Money was gone, pride was wounded, and turning back felt impossible. Before we talk about what truly created wealth during the gold rush, it's important to understand why almost everyone was looking in the same direction. They believed the ground held the answer. They believed gold was the prize, and that belief shaped everything that followed. Before we talk about her success, we must understand the weight she carried just by existing. This was a time when race defined your limits before you ever spoke a word. Being black meant being watched, doubted, and often denied basic rights. Being a woman meant your voice was expected to stay quiet. Being both placed her at the very bottom of society's ladder. Before we talk about opportunity, we need to recognize how rare freedom itself was. In the mid-1800s, many black people in America were still enslaved. Even free black individuals lived under constant threat. Laws could change overnight. Freedom could be challenged. Safety was never guaranteed. For a black woman to be free during this period was not normal. It was exceptional. Before we talk about California, we must understand that racism did not disappear at the state line. Although California entered the Union as a free state, discrimination was deeply rooted. Black people were barred from testifying against white people in court. This meant abuse could happen with no consequences. Protection under the law was an illusion. Before we talk about daily life, we must see how exclusion shaped everything. Jobs were limited. Wages were lower. Housing was restricted. Social spaces were closed. Even basic respect was something that had to be earned again and again. For a black woman, navigating this environment required constant awareness and restraint. Before we talk about the gold rush, we must understand how hostile it was to anyone outside the dominant group. Mining camps were overwhelmingly male and white. Women were rare. Black women were almost non-existent. Their presence alone drew attention, suspicion, and often resentment. Standing out was dangerous. Before we talk about courage, we need to talk about risk. Traveling long distances as a black woman exposed her to violence, exploitation, and theft. There were no guarantees of safety, no systems to fall back on. Every step forward required bravery that history rarely acknowledges. Before we talk about ambition, we must acknowledge the social limits placed on her. Society did not expect black women to own businesses, control money, or influence others. Those roles were reserved for men. Especially white men. Any sign of independence was seen as a threat. Before we talk about mindset, we must understand survival. She learned to read people carefully, to move strategically, to stay alert without appearing confrontational. These skills were not taught in schools. They were learned through experience in a world that offered no forgiveness. Before we talk about success, we must remember that she began with almost nothing except determination and awareness. No inherited wealth, no legal protections, no social backing, just clarity and resilience. Before we talk about what she built, it's important to understand how impossible it should have been. A free black woman with access to opportunity during this era was almost unheard of. And yet, against every expectation, she stood exactly where history said she shouldn't. Before we talk about her rise, we must understand the rules designed to stop it. The laws of that time were not neutral. They were written to protect power, not fairness. On paper, freedom existed. In reality, it came with conditions that favored white men and restricted everyone else. Before we talk about equality, we need to look at the legal barriers. Black people were often denied the right to testify in court against white citizens. This meant crimes could happen openly without consequences. If property was stolen, threats were made, or violence occurred, justice was rarely an option. The law was present, but it did not serve everyone. Before we talk about women, we must recognize their legal position. Women had limited control over money and property. Their economic power was restricted. Independence was discouraged. Business ownership by women was seen as improper. and success made them targets of suspicion rather than respect. Before we talk about social order, we must understand how unwritten rules worked. Society enforced hierarchy through behavior, not just law. Who could speak? Who could lead? Who deserved space? These rules were enforced through ridicule, intimidation, and exclusion. Breaking them came with consequences. Before we talk about the mining camps, we need to understand their culture. They were rough, competitive, and deeply territorial. Strength and dominance defined status. Anyone who did not fit the image of a miner was seen as weak or out of place. A black woman challenged that image simply by being there. Before we talk about acceptance, we must acknowledge resistance. Many miners refused to acknowledge her legitimacy. They questioned her right to earn money. They mocked her intelligence. They spread rumors. Success from someone they believed inferior felt threatening. Before we talk about competition, we must see how fear played a role. Her presence disrupted the narrative that wealth belonged only to white men. Every dollar she earned was proof that the system was flawed. That truth made people uncomfortable, and discomfort often turns into hostility. Before we talk about respect, we must recognize that it was rarely given. It had to be forced through consistency, through results, through endurance. Even then, recognition came reluctantly, if at all. Many chose denial over acceptance. Before we talk about control, we must understand how power reacts when challenged. Those who benefit from inequality resist change instinctively. They question, undermine, and attempt to isolate anyone who rises without permission. Her success did not inspire admiration. It inspired resentment. Before we talk about strength, we must understand what she was pushing against. Not just individuals, but an entire system built to limit her movement. Laws, customs, and attitudes all worked together to keep her small. Before we talk about how she succeeded, it's important to see how much resistance surrounded her. Every step forward happened in an environment that expected her, and that pressure shaped every decision she made. Before we talk about the wealth that was created, we need to confront a hard truth. Gold mining did not make most people rich. It destroyed them. The dream was powerful, but the reality was unforgiving. For every man who found gold, thousands found disappointment. Before we talk about success stories, we must understand the role of luck. Mining was not a science. It was a gamble. Two men could work the same land with the same tools, and only one might find anything of value. Skill offered no guarantee. Effort offered no protection. Everything depended on chance. Before we talk about hard work, we need to see how exhausting the process was. Miners worked from sunrise to darkness. They stood in freezing water. They lifted heavy equipment day after day. Bodies wore down quickly. Injuries were common. Many men became too weak to continue before they ever saw a return. Before we talk about profit, we must acknowledge the costs. Tools were expensive. Food was overpriced. Clothing wore out fast. Shelter had to be paid for. Even when gold was found, much of its value was swallowed by daily survival. The balance rarely favored the miner. Before we talk about persistence, we must talk about laws. Claims were often stolen. Stronger groups pushed weaker ones away. Legal protection was limited. A man could work a site for months and lose everything in a single confrontation. Violence erased effort without warning. Before we talk about hope, we must address how it trapped people. Many miners stayed long after they should have left. They believed the next day would be different. The next dig would pay off. This belief kept them stuck, pouring more time and money into a failing pursuit. Before we talk about mental strain, we must recognize isolation. Families were far away. Communication was rare. Loneliness settled in. Desperation grew. Men watched others succeed while they failed, and that comparison broke spirits. Before we talk about morality, we must acknowledge how pressure changed people. Cheating increased. Theft became common. Trust disappeared. Survival replaced ethics. The environment rewarded aggression, not cooperation. Before we talk about the dream of gold, we must see the outcome. Most miners left poorer than they arrived. Some left broken in health. Others never left at all. The land kept more than it gave. Before we talk about why another path mattered, it's important to understand this truth. Gold mining promised wealth but delivered exhaustion, loss and regret to the majority. And yet almost everyone believed it was the only way forward. Before we talk about wealth, we need to talk about choice. While most people were focused on digging deeper into the ground, she made a decision that changed everything. She chose not to mine. She chose to observe. She watched the environment carefully and asked a different question than everyone else. Before we talk about business, we must understand what she saw. Miners were exhausted, hungry and overwhelmed. They spent long days in harsh conditions and returned with little energy left. They needed food. They needed clean clothes. They needed basic comfort in a place that offered none. These needs were constant, not occasional. Before we talk about strategy, we must see how clearly she understood human behavior. Gold was uncertain. Survival was guaranteed. Every miner needed daily support, whether they found gold or not. She realized that the real demand was not buried underground. It was standing right in front of her. Before we talk about courage, we must acknowledge the risk she took. Choosing business over mining meant going against the dominant belief. It meant rejecting the dream everyone else was chasing. It meant trusting her judgment in an environment that doubted her presence from the start. Before we talk about service, we must understand how essential it was. Clean clothing mattered because disease spread quickly. Proper meals mattered because strength determined survival. A place of order mattered because chaos ruled the camps. She provided solutions where there were problems. Before we talk about consistency, we must recognize how powerful it became. Miners might find gold once, but they needed her services every day. Income did not depend on luck. It depended on reliability. That reliability built trust, and trust built steady profit. Before we talk about growth, we must see how one service led to another. As her reputation spread, demand increased. More miners depended on what she offered. She adapted quickly, adjusting to what people needed most. Flexibility became one of her greatest strengths. Before we talk about competition, we must acknowledge how few others noticed the same opportunity. Most people were too focused on digging, too emotionally attached to the dream of striking it rich. She stayed detached, practical, and observant. Before we talk about power, we must understand control. By serving the miners, she positioned herself at the center of their daily lives. She was not chasing opportunity. Opportunity came to her. That shift changed the balance completely. Before we talk about wealth, it's important to understand this turning point. She didn't win by fighting for gold. She won by supporting those who believed in it. And in doing so, she created something far more valuable than any single discovery. Before we talk about how wealthy she became, we need to look at how growth actually happened. She did not rely on one source of income. She understood early that stability comes from expansion. What began as small essential services slowly evolved into something much larger. Before we talk about scale, we must understand her mindset. She paid attention to patterns. She noticed when demand increased. She saw where money flowed regularly and where it disappeared quickly. Instead of chasing quick wins, she focused on repeat needs. That focus shaped every decision she made. Before we talk about income streams, we must see how naturally they developed. When miners trusted her with one service, they were willing to pay for others. One solution led to another. Each addition made her business stronger and more resilient. She was not guessing. She was responding to real demand. Before we talk about consistency, we must recognize its power. Miners came and went. Claims rose and fell, but her services remained in use every single day. While miners waited for luck to strike, she collected steady earnings. That consistency created predictable growth. Before we talk about comparison, we must understand the difference between her path and theirs. Miners worked for rare moments of success. She worked for daily results. They gambled time and health on uncertain outcomes. She invested effort into systems that paid her back continuously. Before we talk about expansion, we must see how reputation played a role. Word spread quickly in mining camps. Reliability became her currency. The more dependable she was, the more people sought her out. Demand increased without advertising or persuasion. Before we talk about control, we must understand how independence mattered. She did not depend on a single claim, a single partner, or a single location. Multiple income streams protected her from sudden loss. If one area slowed, another continued. Before we talk about wealth comparison, we must acknowledge reality. Many miners experienced brief success followed by long periods of failure. Their income spiked and disappeared. Hers grew steadily. Over time, that difference became impossible to ignore. Before we talk about numbers, we must see the effect of time. Day after day, her earnings accumulated. While miners celebrated rare discoveries, she quietly surpassed them, not through luck, but through structure. Before we talk about what made her richer than miners chasing gold, it's important to understand this truth. Consistency defeated chance. Stability outperformed excitement, and while others waited for fortune to appear, she built it piece by piece. Before we talk about legacy, we need to talk about evidence. Her success was not rumor or exaggeration. Records from the period revealed something that many people found impossible to accept. While miners struggled to survive, her earnings continued to rise. By the mid-1850s, her income exceeded that of most white miners working the fields around her. Before we talk about numbers, we must understand why they mattered. Wealth during the gold rush was usually associated with rare strikes and brief moments of fortune. Most miners never accumulated lasting value, yet her record showed steady repeat earnings. Day after day, week after week, that consistency added up to a level of wealth few miners ever reached. Before we talk about reaction, we must understand the social climate. This was a deeply racist society that believed success belonged to white men by default. The idea that a black woman could outperform them financially challenged everything they believed about superiority, entitlement, and order. Before we talk about disbelief, we must acknowledge denial. Many refused to accept the reality of her success. Some dismissed the numbers. Others spread rumors to explain it away. Admitting the truth meant admitting that their assumptions were wrong, and that was harder than rejecting the evidence. Before we talk about resentment, we must see how wealth exposes prejudice. Her earnings became impossible to ignore. She paid for property. She handled large amounts of money. She operated with confidence. Each visible sign of success amplified the discomfort of those who believed she did not deserve it. Before we talk about power, we must understand what money represented. It meant independence. It meant protection. It meant options. In a society designed to keep her dependent, her financial strength made her an exception. That exception felt threatening. Before we talk about comparison, we must see the contrast clearly. White miners worked endlessly for unpredictable rewards. Many lived in debt. Many lost everything. Meanwhile, her income continued regardless of gold discoveries. The gap widened quietly, but steadily. Before we talk about shock, we must recognize how public this became. People talked. Figures circulated. Her success was discussed in camps and towns. The story spread faster than comfort allowed. It forced people to confront a truth they were not prepared to face. Before we talk about dignity, we must understand how she carried herself. She did not apologize for her success. She did not shrink to ease others' discomfort. She continued operating with discipline and confidence, letting results speak louder than arguments. Before we talk about resistance, we must acknowledge what this moment represented. A black woman earning more than most white miners combined was not just a financial fact, it was a social disruption. It exposed how fragile the myths of superiority really were. Before we talk about the scale of her success, we need to understand the nature of her wealth. Unlike the fleeting victories of miners, her income was stable. It did not depend on luck or rare strikes. It came from services people needed every day. That meant she could predict her earnings. Day by day, month by month, her wealth grew in a reliable rhythm. Before we talk about strategy, we must see how repeatability shaped her power. While miners gambled on a single gold vein, she built systems that worked over and over. Every meal served, every piece of clothing cleaned, every service delivered added to her growing fortune. Unlike digging for gold, her results did not vanish with misfortune or bad timing. Before we talk about growth, we need to contrast her situation with the miners around her. A man could find a rich vein in the morning and lose it to theft in the evening. Claims could be taken by force, equipment could fail, illness could strike without warning. One mistake, one unlucky day, and everything was gone. Before we talk about security, we must acknowledge that her approach protected her from those extremes. Her income was spread across multiple services. If one area slowed, others continued. There was no single point of collapse. Stability gave her freedom that miners chasing gold could only dream of. Before we talk about mindsets, we must recognize how this consistency affected her confidence. She did not wake each morning fearing loss. She did not gamble her life and energy on a single outcome. Her calm, steady approach allowed her to plan, expand and grow, while the men around her scrambled to recover from constant setbacks. Before we talk about advantage, we must see how perception played a role. Miners saw wealth as sudden and unpredictable. They measured it in ounces of gold. She measured it in steady daily results. That difference created a quiet superiority, because over time her gains far outstripped theirs. Before we talk about strategy, we must note how resilience mattered. Wealth that can be repeated is wealth that endures. Each successful day reinforced her system. Each satisfied customer ensured the next day would be profitable. The cycle was self-reinforcing, unlike the miner's gamble, which depended on chance alone. Before we talk about reality, we must remember how fragile the miners' fortunes were. Gold could vanish as quickly as it appeared. Fires, floods and theft wiped out years of labor in moments. The environment rewarded risk but punished consistency. That made her method revolutionary. Before we talk about influence, we must acknowledge how money flows with reliability. Her growing, repeatable income gave her leverage. It allowed her to invest, expand, and maintain control. Miners, by contrast, lived day to day, at the mercy of luck and circumstance. Before we talk about legacy, it's important to understand this truth. Real wealth is not about rare moments of triumph. It is about systems that work, day after day. While miners lost everything overnight, she quietly built an empire that only grew stronger with time. Her story is more than history. It's a blueprint for success. What she did during the gold rush mirrors the principles of modern business and wealth building today. She didn't chase what everyone else wanted. She didn't compete where competition was fierce and unpredictable. Instead, she looked for needs others ignored, created solutions, and built steady growing income. That is the same strategy top entrepreneurs and investors use now. Find opportunities others overlook, focus on consistency and create value that lasts. Real power rarely comes from following the crowd. It comes from seeing what others fail to notice and acting on it with clarity and persistence. She turned exclusion, risk and doubt into advantage, and that same mindset can transform any goal, financial, personal or professional. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more stories and strategies that can change the way you think about success.